In 2021, the extreme weather patterns caused by climate change caused a devastating freeze to hit my state of Texas, and over 200 people died.
And look at this image tonight. This is not the middle of the country or the Northeast. This is Houston.
My classmates and their families were displaced due to this and continue to be due to devastating hurricanes and winter freezes.
La ciénaga, que antes era un paraíso, se ha convertido en un desastre ecológico. Igual que todas las partes del mundo que han ido destruyendo los canales, los ríos, los mares, las aguas, nuestra ciénaga la han ido matando con la contaminación metálica.
I'm half Haitian and half family in Haiti, and during my lifetime alone, the small nation has witnessed 25 major natural disasters. In seeing the impact of these disasters on my family and my community, I'm reminded that it is often those who are least responsible for climate change who end up bearing the brunt of climate impacts.
Hundreds of refugees who have been internally displaced in these communities, who have lost their house and are living in schools, hospitals, warehouses, godowns, and other places in tightly dense and packed situations.
Essentially, we take, abuse, and drain the earth of its resources with no means of giving back. Hence, the world is fighting back.
I began to seek out organizations and spaces where my voice as a young person mattered and where action was promised. This led me to Our Climate.
Our Climate empowers young people to advocate for the science-based, equitable, and intersectional climate justice policies that build a thriving world. We engage and train youth from affected communities and groups to participate in broad and diverse advocacy coalitions. Together, we build deep partnerships, mobilize, and center those most impacted by climate change to dismantle systemic oppression and achieve systemic change. Our Climate was founded in Oregon in 2014 by a group of young people who wanted to advocate for state-level climate policy through grassroots advocacy, lobbying, and distributed action. And since then, it's grown into a national effort featuring chapters across states throughout the US and on the federal level. We work with young people who have little to no advocacy experience and provide them with the tools to advocate for just intersectional climate policy.
The United States' history of racism has trickled down into the climate crisis. The difference in effects climate change has on different communities in the United States is significant. African Americans feel the effects of extreme weather patterns front on, with more and more of our communities being flooded. Black people are more likely to be placed next to power plants and Superfund sites that pollute our communities, and Black people breathe in polluted air at higher rates than we produce.
For me, my perspective on the safety of our homes all changed in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit the shores of the Gulf Coast and literally rocked our world.
In some places of the world, they're experiencing extreme heat, extreme droughts, whilst others have the privilege in just turning a blind eye towards it. And this unequal treatment stems from the fact that some countries contribute the most or contribute so much greenhouse gases to the world and yet do not reduce it or do not feel the immediate impacts in their backyards, hence they don't really do anything about it. However, countries like the Marshall Islands, who contribute 0.0001% of greenhouse gases, are feeling these immediate impacts of climate change in our backyard.
It is the responsibility of those who can and those who create a disproportionate impact, especially the United States government as the top emitting country in the world, to create sweeping climate solutions that consider not only the impacts on the United States, but also the global community. Since our founding, we have recruited over 33,400 young people to advocate for the policies that they want to see to build a livable future.
Through Our Climate, I am able to share my stories and learn of the political stage for me to fight for frontline communities. Because Our Climate teaches fellows like me to use our voices, to organize, and to creatively fight for climate justice. To Marshallese people, to Kashrine people, and to Pacific Islanders in general, The climate crisis is more than an environmental crisis. It's rather an identity crisis.
This pristine, unspoiled land may one day be lost forever. In Marshallese lore, the saying is, if you take away their land, their spirits go too.
Our connection to our land and our water is similar to that of a parent and its child. In our culture, our parents give, we take, we appreciate, and once we get older, we give back. And so to islanders, our land and our water is our parent, whilst we islanders are its child. So we take, it gives, and we give back. Now imagine a relationship between a parent and his child where the parent continues to give and give for the child's well-being. The child takes and takes without appreciating or ever giving back. It's most likely that the parent will retract its kindness and take away that protection from his child due to it being ungrateful. And this is a perfect example of how our capitalistic world and the earth are interacting.
El objetivo de Barranquilla más 20 es educar y empoderar niñas, niños, juventudes y en general a toda la ciudadanía sobre cómo construir territorios con justicia climática de la mano de la protección de la biodiversidad, de la gobernanza del agua, para asegurar el patrimonio natural y cultural que son nuestros ecosistemas en este país, el segundo más biodiverso del planeta. Empezamos Barranquilla más 20 en el año 2012, inspirados por todo el movimiento global que convergió en Río más 20. En ese momento se buscaba construir la agenda global ambiental y quisimos también aportar desde las juventudes en Barranquilla, desde Colombia, con proponer también acciones que puedan alimentar esta agenda global, pero que también puedan responder a los desafíos globales, a los desafíos territoriales que plantea la crisis climática en nuestro territorio, pero también en nuestra generación.
Barranquilla más 20 es una organización que lidera y trabaja desde un enfoque interseccional. Por ello, en nuestra organización participan comunidades indígenas, afro, indígenas sicuanis, comunidades del Pacífico colombiano y hacemos parte de proyectos interseccionales e intersectoriales de trabajo comunitario y rural.
En nuestra ciénaga, la ciénaga de Mallorquín es un tesoro escondido, es un tesoro que tenemos que cuidar, es un tesoro que han ido destruyendo poco a poco las empresas de la Vía 40, los ríos que vienen con los metales de las minas, metales pesados, han sido contaminados y las especies marinas que se han muerto, como los peces, los camarones, los chipichipi, etcétera, etcétera. Han ido taladrando nuestros mangles, mejor dicho, han despedazado nuestra ciénaga en pedacitos y los gobiernos no están tomando las medidas suficientes como para decir, quiero que esto se preserve porque es un patrimonio nacional, internacional y localmente.
El departamento del Atlántico pues, es uno de los departamentos del país con mayor vulnerabilidad frente al cambio climático. Tenemos unos ecosistemas, el Atlántico ha sido bañado por el río Magdalena, pues también tenemos el Mar Caribe, pero tenemos el embalse del Guájaro y también tenemos el canal del Dique, ¿no? Esos digamos, ecosistemas pues de cierta forma nos hacen mayor vulnerable ante la crisis climática y por eso desde Barranquilla más 20 pues hemos venido fortaleciendo las capacidades de las juventudes, de las mujeres, de esas poblaciones que pues se reciben de manera desigual los efectos del cambio climático.
Bring Back Green Foundation is a non-profit founded in 2019, which focuses on mobilizing youth across India and abroad to work towards climate action through engaging in activities of policy advocacy, climate research, activism on ground, and working with affected communities struggling with climate change. Bring Back Green Foundation has been working in the field of environmental conservation through various capacities. We have been working in climate education, we have been working in policy advocacy, youth mobilization, climate activism, waste management, sustainable menstruation, and so much more. In some of our very successful campaigns, one has been climate education. 3 years back, we developed our first climate education framework, a curriculum framework which was submitted to the Education Minister to be implemented. 3 years forward, we have been working in huge capacities towards climate education. We have had our amendments towards the climate education curriculum, provided capacity building and training to over 200 teachers, facilitated discussions, workshops, activities, and training sessions with over 5,000 young people across Kerala and India. We conducted the first international conference on climate education in 2020 to draw attention on the issue of the gap that exists with climate change and education. With policy advocacy, over the past few years, we have submitted various policy recommendations, suggestions, objections, and studies towards state and central governments. Some of them has been received very well and being implemented. We have worked with various government institutions and authorities, especially the local self-government authorities, in various capacities to develop projects, work on campaigns and initiatives. Currently, we are also working on developing local climate resilience within local communities with the help of youth and local self-governments. We have tied up with a government institution to build this project of building youth climate parliaments across the most localized elements of a region, and then understanding and mapping climate vulnerabilities in those areas. For the past 2 years, we have been very closely working with the indigenous coastal communities of Kerala. In particular, a community in Trivandrum has suffered the wrath of climate change for the past couple of years. Year after year, hundreds of people lose homes due to coastal erosion, heavy cyclonic activity, irregular rainfall, and so much other reasons. They are climate refugees, but they do not get those recognition or the privileges that they are supposed to. For the past 3 years, they are living as internally displaced climate refugees, few miles from where they lost their homes. Along with these climate-induced problems, there are other artificial and unscientific constructions that add to the wrath of sea as well as nature on these communities. Developmental issues have displaced these communities and have been creating lots of issues in terms of survival and livelihood. These people rely on their livelihood as being fishermen or fisher folks and have been hugely impacted by the marine biodiversity loss due to harbor construction, artificial and unscientific constructions, etc.
Our climate takes a holistic approach to mentoring young people that accounts for both policy literacy, strategic advocacy, and grassroots organizing, but also art, community building, and self-care as acts of resistance in and of themselves.
Through Our Climate, I have met with U.S. legislators, hosted bingos, and spoke at rallies to engage and educate my peers on the bills and policies that matter to them towards becoming a more sustainable world.
That's why we're here today, to fight and rally for $555 billion of climate justice investments, and it's what we need. Woo!
Climate legislation in the U.S. is so critical because the U.S. contributes the most greenhouse gases or greenhouse emissions. And so the U.S. needs to take responsibility, and hence climate legislation is the place for the U.S. to take responsibility.
In 2021 alone, we mobilized over 10,000 youth leaders to participate in nearly 2,000 strategic events, such as letter writing events, text and phone banking, and other digital actions. We've held over 1,000 legislative meetings and over 140 events, all surrounding community building and advocacy.
One of the obstacles I've come across in my journey has been trying to change the attitude around climate change and climate justice in the United States. Many people believe that climate change isn't real, it doesn't affect them, or it's only an activist issue. However, not only does climate change affect future generations, it interacts with our lives in many ways. Facing food insecurity, water scarcity, or climate refugees are just some, but trying to change the political landscape of your country is never easy.
As a young woman of color in the climate movement, which in my experience has been pretty dominated by older white men, has been being made to feel like I don't have access to decision-making spaces or the agency to make an impact.
My imposter syndrome hit intensely when I met with other climate activists who had established careers, who had companies, who had started nonprofits, who had environmental law careers, who were very well established in their life. And I just felt like I wasn't worthy of being in this space. I felt less knowledgeable, and in my head I thought, who was going to listen to me? I had no expertise, I had no degree at that point. I was very young, I had no company, I had nothing. And so I was very afraid of the climate scene for a bit and a little bit embarrassed to be in it.
From meetings with policymakers to coalition spaces to think tanks, I've sometimes felt like my voice doesn't really matter, which has taught me how to hone in on my voice and build community even within these spaces. These experiences have definitely made the friendship and the community and sisterhood that I found along the way even more meaningful, and I'm so grateful for the people that I've met along the way, and in awe of their strength and in awe of all the work that they're doing.
Through the support of my friends, my family, my peers, and those back home who look up to me, I felt like I was the strongest person in the room, because I had the experience of what it's like to be living in a community where the immediate impacts of climate change are happening. Because I was willing to dedicate my education and my life to this cause. I was starting in a place of zero with no idea of what kind of climate policies were happening in the world, what climate policies even look like in other countries, and I was willing to put myself in those spaces and push through the darkness. I was willing to educate myself about this because I do know I am worthy of this space. Everybody where I'm from is worthy of this space. All Frontline community members are worthy of this space because our stories are the most powerful.
Al fondo pueden apreciar cómo se ven las nuevas edificaciones de unos 10, 20, 30 pisos, no sé. Y acá de este lado donde todavía podemos lograr, creemos que todavía podemos lograr protección sobre esta zona, hemos venido sembrando algunos individuos nuevos de mangle. Sabremos que la tasa de retorno ambiental es acerca de 10 años, es decir, que teníamos que esperar 10 años para que estos nuevos individuos que se han sembrado puedan realizar su función de absorción de CO2. Sabemos que el bosque de manglares es de los que más absorben CO2, que es el gas de efecto invernadero más contaminante. Entonces sería una locura si llegara a desaparecer este bosque de manglar, que mi concepto es el patrimonio ambiental más grande que tienen los barranquilleros.
Nuestra estrategia como Barranquilla más 20 es educar y empoderar a esta generación, a los niños, a las niñas, a las mujeres, quienes hemos sido históricamente invisibilizadas por nuestro aporte para combatir la crisis climática y para la defensa del ambiente. Somos conscientes que la crisis climática, la crisis de la biodiversidad y en general la crisis planetaria no se va a resolver con una acción en un solo frente y que necesita de soluciones colectivas, que necesita de soluciones intergeneracionales y en diferentes frentes para poder tener ese impacto en largo plazo, que es cuando en la cultura esté instalada la acción climática, cuando sea cotidiano hablar de estos asuntos. También nos movilizamos por la educación. Sabemos que es el frente para renovar esos hábitos. Con Mallorquín Vive, con Guardianes de Bocas de Cenizas y con Mujeres por la Justicia Climática, que son una de las iniciativas que realiza Barranquilla más 20, estamos invirtiendo en el potencial de las personas para ser agentes de cambio, para hacer cambios transformacionales que puedan conservar este país, no solo para nosotros y nosotras, sino también para el planeta.
Hemos trabajado durante 10 años en Barranquilla más 20. Hemos encontrado diferentes limitantes frente a la garantía de participación y acceso a la información pública en asuntos de cambio climático y biodiversidad, especialmente en proyectos estratégicos que están haciendo impacto en comunidades y en territorios donde hay gran biodiversidad. Y pues también hemos encontrado obstáculos frente al financiamiento y frente a la sostenibilidad de procesos en el territorio. También otro desafío importante es superar, digamos, la violencia de género, superar, digamos, esas amenazas frente a los liderazgos sociales y ambientales en el territorio. Recordemos que Colombia es uno de los países donde más líderes ambientales pues han sido asesinados. Entonces, pues por ello es también un gran desafío superar esa violencia y, digamos, mayor empoderamiento hacia mujeres que están liderando organizaciones sociales y ambientales, que también pues ese es un gran obstáculo.
As a young registered non-profit organization run by young people, it has been extremely difficult to source funding in the initial few years. We had to self-finance our campaigns, initiatives and projects while we progressed ahead. Another big issue that we were facing as young people were getting to convince stakeholders or other older veterans to join the climate movement or let them understand what we are trying to convey. Yet another challenge is understanding as a young person that solving climate change is not a short game. It's a long shot, it's a long game. And coming to that understanding would have taken some time for me and other young individuals in my organization. It's very important because government institutions wouldn't take your recommendation seriously the very instant that you give them. It takes a lot of follow-up, active engagement, and thoroughly having the patience to see it come to life.
Today I know that through my storytelling, I can make a difference.
Although this line of work can be exhausting, I'm constantly energized and inspired by the natural world. Reading books like Rooted by Leandalyn Haupt and Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer have really helped me relearn my relationship to the natural world and reframe my relationship to advocacy, not merely as an act of survival and self-preservation, but as an act of building reciprocity with the natural world and healing our relationship to Mother Earth. Every moment that I'm able to spend outside, from sitting under a tree to watching rivers flow to looking up at the stars, just reminds me of the vastness of the beauty and the love and the joy that flows around us through Earth, and really redoubles my commitment to protect it for the future.
The thing that keeps me going and motivates me is seeing the effort that the other young people around me put in. One government alone following through on climate promises is not enough. It's strong action globally. That's what works. This is why seeing my peers taking out time to rally in their free time or protesting during school is what keeps me going. And this is why we're not gonna stop, because we know that accountability and rallying behind an issue is what works.
My inspiration and my motivation really come from my identity as a Pacific Islander, because my motivation is my home. And knowing that I have the platform to ensure that my people's voices are heard and our struggles are on those climate agendas is what pushes me to fight. Pacific Islands know that our islands are representative of our history and hold such an integral part of our identity. No one should have to choose between living and keeping your identity. What we experience as small islands yet big ocean nations is what bigger nations will experience, but tenfold. Addressing the current climate crisis in climate vulnerable countries is very important for the future of not just our Pacific Island nations, but the entire world. My hope in the climate movement is derived from the passion and determination of frontline communities. So to my Pacific Island brothers and sisters who are fighting for our life and our islands, keep fighting that good fight.
Climate anxiety is real, and sometimes thinking about all the forces and the powers in place against finding a solution, against legislative action, is enough to just make me feel completely debilitated and hopeless about our future. But I then look to all of the grassroots movements across the world, all the young people, all the people of my generation fighting for our future. And I am constantly inspired and in awe of the faith that young people have in our ability to build a better future, a more caring future, and a safe future for us all.
Desde Barranquilla más 20 se está trabajando duro porque estamos preocupados, igual que las organizaciones del mundo, estamos trabajando para el problema del cambio climático que tenemos. Esto no es nuestro solamente. Esto es mundial, pero desde Barranquilla se está haciendo un trabajo mancomunado con todas las organizaciones sociales, empoderando mujeres, niños y hombres. Y le decimos a los mandatarios del mundo, un alto ya, dinero para tratar esto que se necesita en los países latinoamericanos, estamos todos, porque tenemos falta de recursos, porque no le prestan atención al clima que tenemos y a la devastación mundial que nos viene. El cambio tiene que ser ya, señores, esto no aguanta más.
Nos inspira la equidad intergeneracional, nos inspira la equidad de género, nos inspira la justicia climática. Estamos desde la Ciénaga mallorquí luchando y trabajando por nuestras presentes y futuras generaciones.
What has motivated us the most has been seeing other young people across the world striving towards and showing their commitment towards climate change. The leadership that other young people have shown in this field has really driven us to work better and towards our communities. Young people across the world are not just engaging on their local grounds, but also actively engaging with the UNFCCC processes and with policy stakeholders, which drives for a greater impact and greater result. As an organization, we value education, youth, and the rights for impacted communities. We want to see climate refugees as an official term and something that's recognized. Climate refugees has to have legal rights. Internally displaced communities has to be granted these rights and has to be seen visible by the policy stakeholders. Climate-induced migration and climate refugees is one of the biggest crises we are going to face in this century. If we are not ready for it, with legal laws, action plans, and policy stakeholders ready to engage with it, we are going to see a huge crisis in the making. We want climate refugees to be in the forefront of the next agendas on creating policies for climate change, and also look into climate-induced migration with active seriousness.
Today's young people are the generation most impacted by the climate crisis, but we are also the generation most powerful to fight it.
I am just filled with immense gratitude for all of the work that people are doing every day for our planet, and it really inspires me to remain committed to do the same.
Home is always worth it!
Home is always worth it.
Home is always worth it!